My question's for Sandy, and I guess the gentleman from Maverick can probably answer it as well. Sandy, you mentioned that you use the best provider for a job, right? That's your sort of first priority. But then there's also pressures of reducing project cost. So you have to take a look at how much you're spending on a contractor or a vendor of an automation solution and materials and construction. So how does that affect, let's say, your decision-making process when you have, let's say, 3 options on the table, and let's say a vendor has very high quality but also very high cost, and then you have a second vendor that's almost there but has a substantially less cost associated with it. So the risk kind of increases a little bit because you're paying less as well. Could you kind of maybe answer that question as to what goes through your head and how you make that decision as to what to do?
Well, we do a condition assessment, so you can put everything, almost everything, in financial terms, and so it's not always the case that we in fact, our selection is not just to pick the low cost, absolute. We want to really look at what is the cost going to be at the end of the project, and then evaluate it that way, taking into account all the risks that we may be taking by working with a particular contractor. So there's many cases where if we just looked at the original bid cost, we considered there were other risks that we needed to take into account and didn't select that provider. So we're really looking at what the ultimate price is going to be. We also look at life cycle, so we have to be aware of what the costs are going to be for the operating organization after we turn the project over to them. So that's a factor in our selection process. So, I've had the automation providers ask me, well, what are the things that are important to you? And what I'll tell them is there's about 30 things that we consider, a long list of items. And they always say, well, what's the most important? Well, I'm not sure I'll tell you that, because I don't want you working towards those few things that are considered most important. I want you to be the best considering all 30 points. So we do a very extensive evaluation of the providers, and cost is just one factor. We're looking at what their project team is going to look like. We want to look at what their workload happens to be at the time. We want to look at what technology they're going to be able to offer. We want to look at what experience they have with us. We want to look at what experience they have on a particular kind of project that we're executing, whether it be an LNG facility or an oil facility. I mean, there's a whole long list of things that we take into account. So cost is not the only driver. And really, what we tell our leadership is that we want to make sure we got the lowest cost when we start up this facility, and have the lowest cost when we're operating this facility, not necessarily what the bid cost is. So I also tell you, and just for all the automation providers, when we evaluate their bids, we're not just looking at what they offer us. We want to make sure that everything's included. So we'll evaluate everything that they've proposed for the job in terms of components, in terms of services. And if we think they've missed something, then we'll ask a whole bunch of questions to make sure they've included that. And in many cases, they'll say, yeah, we forgot about that, so they'll add it into the price. So we want to make sure that when we make the selection, we've picked the very best provider, and that provider's not going to be in the hole when we sign the contract. We don't want them bidding something low and then finding out that they don't have everything covered and that they're in the hole executing the job. Because what we found on our projects, these projects go on for 5 or 6 years. And the automation provider, we've gone all the way from $10 million up to $70 million in terms of cost just for that item. And if they've bid low, they're going to be hurt over that 5 or 6 year period. And so we want to make sure that's not the case. So we do, in our evaluation of the bids, we make sure that everything's included such that we're making the best selection at the point that we award the contract.
Did you want to comment?
Yeah, just to build on that, the best clients, the work that we have to work with are like Sandy and others that are asking those questions, and really it's getting down to who are we as a company and can we deliver? The worst is, can you give me your rate sheet? Because it's about cost, and they're going to compare, $20 an hour to $22 an hour, and that does not deliver value. That just does not do it. It does not speak to the whole solution. So that's real risky when you do it that way. It's lower risk when you do it what Sandy just described.
Again, risk to you. Risk to you as the contractor.
It is risk to us as well,
Yeah,
yes.
in the end, it's a risk to the company, too, that you're buying from, but sometimes they want to take that. It's one of my questions is, well, go ahead, Sandy, you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, though, our approach is a little bit different than our downstream folks. And we haven't standardized on one provider. We have all of the major providers trying to get our business, and they are doing everything to improve how they do their job. They're doing everything to lower their price as much as they can. So we get the benefit of that competitive environment, not only in execution but in price. So we get a very good price from all of them because they're competing to get our business.
What I was going to ask is, I think it's come up with a couple people here, but my experience in the past, and again, in the courses I teach and stuff, there's this trade-off. You could spend an awful lot of money making everything risk-free.
Right.
Many people, the courses I teach are to project managers who are doing projects often inside their own organization. I happen to live by D.C., so a lot of them are like government things or they're doing stuff like that. And the common complaint is, yeah, I don't have the budget. It starts off bad. The management or leadership or whatever term you want to use that authorized this project, somebody is a little more risk taker than I am. And so they say, no, you don't need money for that. You don't need a contingency for that. You don't need time for that. So what you end up with is projects that are planned with sometimes not enough time, sometimes not enough money. And you can't just go in as a good these people are good, smart people, and they say, I've gone through and added up all these risks, and I think we should put like 15 or 20% contingency in. And then probably if you looked at it, you might come up with that, but their boss says, nah, or the classic, this is the budget amount I think it should be. I think you should cut 10% off that. That type of attitude. I'm sure everybody who's done projects has experienced that. Well, I presume I certainly have. And I'm just wondering how that is in the world today. So at Exxon, or I don't know if Jerry would want to talk about that for Dallas. It's up to you. But.
Well, I would just say that.
So is their attitude supportive in that sense?
If that's all that you do, then that could be problematic. If somebody just says cut the schedule or cut the cost without doing anything else, that could be problematic. But I will tell you that in our case, we spend a lot of time planning. We spend a lot of time picking our contractors. We spend a lot of time looking at the execution plan. We make sure that all those things are right. And there are certain things that we just won't do. We'll delay the project if we think there's a risk that we can't tolerate. And so if you just cut it and don't do anything else, well, then you could be creating a problem. But if you're doing a lot of planning, you're making sure you've got the right providers that are involved, you got all the right experts within your organization looking at it. We have subject matter experts within the organization that come in to look at things from time to time. And so we do a lot of things to try to identify risk, mitigate the risk, or reduce the risk before we'll move forward.
I'll just kick it up to an industry level, but I think any of us are aware of examples across many companies where deliverables are dictated to project teams, and it creates potentially a situation where you then have a risk around successful delivery not being feasible. So that's actually another risk, but that's actually, you come back to how do you start doing better? Well, everyone needs to start paying attention to understanding and successfully managing the risk, and listening to project teams, listening to the people who have been granted accountability to deliver. That's part of it within an owner or an accountable entity.
Any other questions? I have others, but I don't want to ask them. Yes?
Yeah, for Maverick, you had stated earlier that certification makes you, a better supplier versus just on cost. In your case, what would be some of those certifications or industry knowledge?
We're CSIA, which that's a certification that, it's around the business piece of it, and some, trying to think of the word, but put me a wrap around it.
Some of the items in the certification which come from our best practices are like project management, system development, lifecycle, quality assurance program, and financial management. They would be directly
So if you go back to project management certification, our project managers are PMP certified. We have professional engineers as well, so we can do the right diligence there. Certified automation professionals, we have a lot of folks that are associated with that. There's a continuous education piece that's associated with Maverick. We want to retain the best folks, and we want them to grow and to learn in their business. We have, like myself, I had almost 35 years with Dow going into Maverick. A lot of the folks that have come in that have 20-plus years of industry knowledge, have run refineries, or they've run different unit operations, whether it's chemical processing or whether it's whatever the vertical industry is. So there's a lot of process experience, and so we share that process experience also in the continuous learning piece. We have a thing called Maverick University that we send our folks through. It's just organized of how they do it and what they need to learn. And then there's the technology side where they're learning the technology of Maverick as platforms, whether it's a ABB system, whether it's Yokogawa, whether it's Emerson, learning those platforms to be able to deliver. And one of the biggest things is the process automation. If you think about what we're trying to do, is we're trying to deliver process automation, whether it's process control and the information piece to make the process automation an integrated solution. It's about knowing the process piece. Platforms are tools, and we have to look at it that way. They're not the end-all to be-all, but that understanding of the process design, how to deliver process automation is critical. And so that's what we work on.